Hi, Rachel. Welcome to the show.
Hi, so good to see you, Kristen.
So good to see you too. And I feel like this has been a long time coming. Like from when I first met you in Mod 1, I was like, we have got to co-create something. So I am super excited to be doing this with you today.
I have felt the exact same way. Our paths have been crossing consistently in the past few years. So yay, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
My name is Rachel Kuhlen. I am a keynote speaker, published author, and certified coach. And I work to empower people so they can amplify their life. So living and leading with impact. And that's what I do day in, day out. That's what I speak about. That's what I coach about. And happy to be here and talking about it.
Yeah. And you were such an amazing person in all of those areas. I just loved watching you coach, was super powerful. And I know I saw is it like a workbook that you just came out with? I mean,
Yep.
that's amazing too. So you're just doing all kinds of like great work over there.
Thank you. Thank you. For myself, and I know we'll get into this, is about being bold and stepping in. And so that workbook that I published was part of that. Let's just be bold. And thank you very much for acknowledging that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what brought you into the coaching space?
In 2020, I remember exactly where I was standing the moment the email invitation came in. It was a 15-minute call with my boss at 6:15 in the morning. And I was like, this really can't be good. It turns out it wasn't good in the sense that it was like that we no longer need you in this role here. And after the wind down of that experience and thinking about what was next, a huge aha moment for me was I had allowed people and situations out of my control to control my happiness and my worth. And I was sat in that for a bit, and I did the resume thing, sent it out, had some great companies coming back after me, and my heart wasn't in it. And I was like, well, what do I truly love to do? I did Google how to open up a wine bar. And after about 20 minutes of researching that, I was like, well, this is not going to happen. So
Oh, we have that in common too, by the way, the wine thing.
well, maybe we need to talk. Maybe we need to talk. And then really just thinking about what do I really love? And what I really loved was coaching. And I coached for years in Fortune 100 companies, global teams, leading teams. I loved coaching. And I was like, well, let's pursue coaching. And that's how I ended up in there.
So initially, so you kind of have a leadership background, but initially you went into coaching around relationships.
Yes, yes. And I'm still known as a relationship coach. And I'm happy about that only because everything is relationships, Kristen. As
Yeah.
you know, as a coach, it's the relationship with ourselves is the first relationship. Our relationships with others are a reflection of our relationship with ourselves. So everything really is relationships. And it was a great foundation. It still is a great foundation. A lot of my clients and my work around reputation, around relationships still exist. To be in that space, to learn a lot about humans, how things work, how we reconnect with ourselves. So yes, a relationship coach, and that has morphed and transitioned into more leadership, keynote speaking, and zooming out from relationship coaching. If that's the 5,000-foot view, now we've zoomed out maybe to 15, 20,000 feet, doing something a little bit differently.
Do you plan on continuing to kind of like juggle both? I guess they're both kind of niches in their own sense.
They are niches in their own sense. Yeah, I do. I love them both. And like I said, everything is relationships. It's all at the base is relationships. And on my social media and my videos that have gone viral have all been around in that relationship space. And so, I like it there. Like I feel comfortable there. I enjoy my community there. So yeah, so navigating both is a pleasure. Because no matter what you come to me for, we're always really focusing on the same thing, which is how we connect with ourselves to move forward. So yes.
Yeah, I think, it's like, I feel like business coaching, relationship coaching, and financial coaching are probably like the trifecta of like the successful niches that everybody needs help in, right? So like you've got 2 out of 3. So as
There
soon as
you
you add the
go.
financial to it, you're going to be like unstoppable.
Oh my gosh, please stop me. Please stop me. Thank you.
So what do you think? So you obviously got let go from your job. Was that kind of the inciting incident that made you realize like, okay, I need to make a shift here because I'm not super happy in the space that I'm in and I want to move forward into something else?
That was absolutely the inciting incident. And when I reflect upon that experience, And, hindsight, I see all the synchronicities that were happening in the 4 to 6 months prior to that experience happening. So I had finally paid off all my debt from my divorce and the credit card debt and all this. I had finally paid up all my debt. I had gotten to an interesting space in what I was doing for actual work that wasn't aligned as much to what I was there to do. So I was coaching a lot more, doing a lot more work that was a little bit different. And a lot of things were really happening synchronistically, that when that incident happened, the initial, I'm worthless, this is terrible, does everyone really think I'm that incapable? Like, what do people think about? When that fog started to lift, it was like, oh, okay, here is an opportunity for me to actually decide who I want to be and what I want to do. And I don't know if I could have done that 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Where I am today, definitely, I was in a much better mental space to be able to take on this next chapter, which we are both in, with clear eyes, a bit better sense of self, to be able to do it. Because being an entrepreneur, being on your own, doing these things it's a different level, right? The security of the paycheck and the 401k plan, and that's not there. And so for me, it was the exciting. And so that moment was pivotal in me finally choosing myself,
Mm.
realizing that I could go from limited to limitless by just trusting myself.
Yeah, I love that. And what I find so interesting is that you had a lot of self-awareness around your thoughts, feelings, your motivations, which I know for a lot of us, a lot of that didn't come until we got into coach training, right? It was just like that really brought the self-awareness, like now you really got to learn it. But you were already kind of like in that space before you started the coach training program.
Thank you. I've been, since my divorce in 2014, I've been on this epic journey from divorce, moved across the country, don't know a soul, financial insecurity, in very unhealthy relationships, circling the drain of not great. And in 2017 is when I had a moment, that aha moment for me, which was like, you're creating this. you're creating, what's happening is all based on the decisions that you're making and the choices you're doing. So that was the ramp into, where at 2020 was. So I'd been doing some work, some personal work and some development work to get out of that, and fortunately, remarried, have a child, like a lot of incredible things have happened, which really ramped me up to be prepared for 2020. But I don't think anything would have prepared me for what we went through when we were in coaching school.
Oh no. I mean, it's funny because Elaine as well.
Yes.
We went through the program together,
Yeah.
and we always joke about how like we started mod one, and it was like we'd made the decision to go into coaching and got there, and it was like look at all these people wanting to be coaches, and like I don't really need a coach, I just want to be a coach. And then you get maybe a couple hours into mod one, and it was like, oh boy, like I need a coach. I need a coach so bad.
I desperately need a coach, and I do not feel prepared to coach anybody, right?
Yes.
Like, oh God, don't put me on the spot. I don't even know what to ask or do. You're right. You're so right. But what an incredible experience to have hundreds of hours of coaching, being coached, like that in itself. I don't know. I would love to hear from you, but for me it changed. It's almost like my life before coaching and my life after coaching and how I think and process. I'd be curious for you.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, I was very into like personal growth, self-development for several years before I went into coach training. But I felt like that program was like putting a turbocharger on personal growth. I mean, it was like, you really got to get like your side of the street clean. Because,
Yes.
they talk a lot about, walking the talk, and you're not just being a coach when you're being a coach. Like this is an identity that you take, and that is your identity even when you're not coaching. Which at the time I was like, wasn't sure how I felt about that, right? Because it was like I'm so used to like almost compartmentalizing. Like I'd always been an ultrasound tech at work, but then outside of work, I wouldn't have identified myself by that. Whereas a coach, it really is, it's something that you embody. And so it was definitely a lot of transformation, a lot of introspection, reflection. I had kind of the similar experience. I had been divorced, and that was like my wake up call that I really needed to figure out who I was, because my whole identity had been wrapped up in that person. And now that that wasn't there, it was like, well, if my whole identity is wrapped up in this, who am I now? And so that was, yeah, coming out of the divorce, I think for me too, was also that start of the process of like, I really need to start looking at myself and doing some work on the inside.
Yeah, I think your word identity is such like that's it, right? That's the word. It's like finding out our identity and like who am I really and what are my values and what is this space? So yeah, that's it, right? And finding your identity and still working on it, right? Still evolving
Oh
and
yeah,
working on that. Yes, I love that word that you used.
it is. It's interesting, like, when you go through the coach training program, it's like you're coming into a new identity with that as well, right? And then we get out of the coach training and we become solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and that itself is another identity. Um, and it's kind of this really bumpy process of like trying to embody and learn and be these new things at the same time.
Yes, yes. And trying to do that. And then, but still the old stuff, and I'd also be interested, still the old stuff coming in, like, what are my friends and family going to think? And what are my former coworkers going to think? And like that, those old tapes in our head start to play, even though we've been through this program. For me, at least, it was like that stuff was still starting to come in as they're starting to branch out and do something different and get to be known as something different.
Mhm.
I don't
I
know about
wonder,
for you.
what was your experience like with that? Like, I know some people that they had a really great support system. They moved from one career to another, and we're talking like night and day different careers. Um, and their family, friends, everybody was supportive. I've known the other side where everybody thought they were going crazy because it was like, you want to quit this to do what is life coaching?
Yeah. What is this elixir that you are
Yeah.
drinking right now? Fortunately for me, I had the good side. Everyone was 1,000% on board and supportive. There may have been one or two on the periphery that were asking those questions, not with me in the room, and that's fine, right? That's fine. Everyone was incredibly supportive. It was still my own that old gremlin dialogue, and maybe there's one person and I don't know who they are, or, what's this person going to think? Those things happen, right? Those are natural to worry, but yes, fortunately a lot of support.
That's good to hear. And you were kind of touching on core values. I know that like in the coach training program, that was kind of the initial thing that we really started with, was looking at what are our core values. Um, and just kind of wondering, from where you were before and then to like where you are now, did your core values have to change?
Yeah, I think actually my core values had changed. I just hadn't acknowledged or wanted to change along with them out of fear of what it was going to be seen or perceived as, or what I would actually have to acknowledge by living into it. So they had changed, and that strife, that tension between the former and now these was definitely there. And I'll give you an example of this. And I actually do this with all my new clients, is the values review, because I think it is
Yes.
so insightful. For me, I grew up extremely religious, 16 years in private Catholic school through college, studied theology, have a degree in theology, and now I identify as spiritual. I don't even identify as religious, but that's a huge identity and a huge part of my current family existence, going to church, doing the thing. So really, all right, that shift in that value to feeling more spiritual. Another thing that I grew up feeling was really important was honoring our commitments, right? Which is important to me. But I also believe in autonomy and the decision to choose and make a change, and not having to, necessarily have to explain myself away to others for a shift that I feel. Appreciating novelty more than I did before, and enjoying novelty and being open to that. So those are some of just my initial core values that had changed, but I didn't want to acknowledge it because I didn't want to think about what it would actually mean for my relationships, my close relationships, to not be this old Rachel. What
Mhm.
about for you? What was for you?
I think probably maybe about a year or so before I entered the coach training program was the first time that I actually heard the terminology or core values. And it was on a podcast. And they were talking about, identifying like, I don't know why it's always 5. Like it just seems like that's the number everybody agrees on. I'm like, okay, whatever, I usually tell my clients, I'm like, I'll allow 6,
And
we'll
whatever.
just we'll just do whatever. Um, but I think for me, it was the first time that I really looked at like, what are my values? Like, what are the things that are really important to me? And as I went through like the list of all the words, right? I mean, you look at it and you're like, well, I want to be all these things.
Yeah.
But there were certain words that like really hit, or it was like, yes, that is so important to me. So like integrity was a big one. And I think that a lot of that came from having relationships and past work history at places where I didn't feel like there was a lot of integrity. And
Mm.
so that became really valuable to me. Um, and then there's definitely like the recognition of I've always had the value of service. So I went into healthcare. I love to help people. Um, and I think the one that kind of came out that I wasn't really aware of is like a sense of adventure, where it feels kind of like you're always exploring and trying new things, going new places. And I think even part of that is like exploring within yourself, right? Like the
Yes.
adventure of discovering who I am and how I'm changing, and knowing that like 5 years from now, I'm definitely not going to be the same person. Um, and being able to say like, it was an adventure getting from like this point to this point. The messy middle was an
The
adventure
messy
for
middle.
sure.
Oh my gosh, the messy middle is right. Isn't that right? And so often I find clients or people I speak to, they have the values they think they should have,
Yes.
that's what everyone expects of them. And I should have this, right? This, and they hold on to this, and there's that tension, right? Like, what are other people gonna think if I'm not these things? And versus the values that you actually have. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean you don't appreciate honor or commitment or the things that are really important. They're just maybe not in the top 5 or 6, right?
Yep.
They're still on the list. They're just not,
Yeah.
they don't rank as high. That's all.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think it's, I know that there's been a lot of people that I've talked to, guests on the podcast that noticed a shift in their values. And it was a lot of times they were carrying like family values because those are the ones that had been given to
Yes.
them. And that's all they ever knew. And that transition of recognizing that those are great values, mom and dad, but it's not my truth. And my values have shifted to this, and having that fear of like, am I still going to belong to my family? Are they still going to accept me, even though I don't hold necessarily the same values that they do? And I can say that I didn't have to experience that. Like my family's always been very open to like, you just be whoever you need to be. Um, but it was very much like, I can imagine the difficulty of feeling like 2 different identities, and almost like that feeling that sense of like you're going to lose a little bit your belonging if
Yes.
you decide to make that change.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge reason why people don't make a lot of changes, that they're going to get kicked out of the nest, right? They're going to be abandoned. And all of our primal needs is for someone to, for connection, and to feel like, oh my God, I'm going to be abandoned if I do this thing. Keeps a lot of people
Yeah.
in their comfort zone, which isn't actually comfortable and
Yeah.
safe, but
Yeah.
not living your truth.
I will say, like thinking about it though, in the process of growth, I definitely had friendship relationships that ended, because I think there was like that shift in values on my part, or I was growing and they weren't. And it became this kind of part where it was like, why are we, continuing a relationship that doesn't really feel like it's aligned? So I definitely had a lot of those relationships kind of come to an end. And that is a hard thing to, lose somebody that you cared about, sometimes very deeply, but just recognizing that, I need to let this go because I need to create space for somebody who is more aligned and does honor my values for them to come in.
Yeah. And that is tough. I had a few of those too, where I wouldn't say it's been a complete disconnect, but the connection that we have isn't as often as deep as, and it's not that I've grown and they have, it's like we're just in different spaces and where we are. And to your point, but that's hard. It's hard to have to look at that and think like, oh gosh, it's not the same. And that can, it's like a breakup.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It's
hard.
definitely not the easiest
Part of the
thing
messy
sometimes.
middle, part of the messy middle
Yes.
in all this.
Which is so funny because that's been such a great question talking to people about that, because they're like, well, I don't ever feel like I came out of the messy middle, right? And I'm like, we kind of don't. I mean, there's like birth, and then we all end up with the same, the same place. And then
Right.
that whole part is like the messy middle of life. But it's, I think we go through several different transformations throughout life. And I kind of almost look at it as like, yeah, that's all in the over the big messy middle. But then each one of those transformations has its own little messy middle that goes along with it. So what did yours look like in this transition?
My messy middle was, well, I'm still in it. I think you would say you're still in it, as you just say, like everything has its own form. As something finishes, another thing shows up. My messy middle in this transformation has been in trying to find my identity and express my identity as a coach to the world, and figure out where my place was in that, and where do I fit in, and where is my community, and what do I want my voice to be about, to bring in that community, to attract that community, and how am I going to stand in this space? And so that for me felt like the messiest. And I will tell you, as I've transitioned, as I talked about, relationship coaching is where I started, and things have definitely transitioned. I've struggled, and I've talked to Elaine, who's my coach. I talked to Elaine about this, that like, I feel like I've given up, and I spent all this time working in this area, and what are people going to think if I shift again? So all those started to come up again, right? So I was creating an identity. That identity was starting to flow and create. And as you so wonderfully pointed out, like we're always evolving and changing. And so then the next opportunity, the next things start to show themselves, but it feels like, well, hold on, does this mean I'm not that anymore? And am I abandoning the community that's joined me? And, I, in my head, got very stuck with, I thought like, well, no, there's a way you can totally mesh the two, and it makes sense, and it's going to be a seamless transition. And the more I tried to make it a seamless transition, I just was in the dark. I think, is it Brene Brown that talks about, or I know she talks about the messy middle, but like, you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but you've gone so far enough in that you don't see the light at the beginning of the tunnel either. And you're just sort of standing there in the dark. Like, I got to make a decision. I'm either going to have to move forward and find that light, or I can go back. Like, I know it's there, but there's a reason I left.
Mm-hmm.
For walking that path into that tunnel, and acknowledging that as well. So that has been my biggest professional messy middle, is navigating that space, which I think is common for coaches and people in our business and entrepreneurs. I'd love to hear about you.
I mean, I absolutely agree. And I never really settled on a defined niche, which has been a struggle, right? Because that's something that is like ingrained in us from the coach training program. But not only that, it's, the other, I guess, business promoters out there, like, you need to niche down. You need to know your niche. You're never going to be able to market yourself and actually find your people if you don't niche down. And I fought that really hard, because I didn't feel like I needed to narrow it down to like, I serve single housewives who live in suburbs. I mean, it was just like, it just felt so unnatural to me. And really, honestly, when we go through coach training, right, we're taught that we can coach anyone at any time around anything. Like, we're kind of generalists, right? You just kind of happen to find maybe the areas that you are passionate about, and you go with it. But I kind of looked at it like, I didn't see it as an either or. I looked at it as a both and. So I can do both spiritual coaching, and I can coach around leadership. That's definitely not like my mix. I appreciate leadership coaching, and I see the opportunity in it, because, like I said, the corporate coaching and business coaching seems to be a very booming area. But I didn't feel like I needed to narrow it down so much to, this is the one type of thing that because I want to be able to change my mind. Or maybe when I start coaching somebody around something and it really lights me up and I never realized it before, it's like, well, I want to be able to explore that opportunity.
Right. And I love that. And I think that's so spot on, where my messy middle is. It's like, well, I can do a lot of different things, but you hear these voices that say, you got to find the thing and be known for the thing. when the truth is, the whole truth of it is your energy, wherever you are energetically, is going to attract the people who energetically are matched to you and need what you are doing, whether it is spiritual or leadership or financial area. Like that's that's the whole truth, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that is an awareness that I still work with, and I'm still trying to continue to cultivate and be like, it's okay, you're gonna be fine. Like, but that's the truth. You're absolutely right. Like that's the truth. And someone else's version of what their truth is could be their truth. It doesn't necessarily make it yours. And that's where
Mhm.
standing on your own and living those values is so important, because you're just showing that, nope, I can be a successful coach. I can have an extremely successful podcast. I can have extremely successful business outside of this. And I didn't even have to pick a niche to do it. And
Yeah.
you're doing it. You're doing
Yeah.
it.
I mean, to the point like that we're making about like having your message and being directed towards one, type of person that you're trying to attract in. My first paying client was, I like told her that I did this, like had started coaching, and I rover sat for her, like house and dog sat for her. So it
See?
was just like in passing conversation that I
Yeah.
mentioned that I do this, and that became my first client. Like she definitely wasn't reading my ICA magnet and all of the marketing efforts that I was putting out there. She hadn't seen any of those, but she
Yes.
went off of like the energy that we had in
Yes.
conversation and hired me as a coach. And it was like, okay, so point proven. I don't have to have this like super narrowed down.
Yes.
It's all just about the energy that you bring, and people resonate with that, and then they want to work with you.
That is 100% it. And you're a perfect example of how that works. You're energetically, we're brought together, and the universe, and it worked. And now look at
Yep.
you, you have what you need. You're getting paid in addition to doing the wonderful pot. And like, it's all there. And
Yeah.
it's just by showing up.
And I'm interested too, because I know you are also kind of going down some different paths with your business, kind of like I am, that it's not just about the coaching, right? So you're doing like a ton of content creation for Facebook and Pinterest and
Yes.
all the things. And I'd like love to know kind of your, like, was that something that you were seeking out, or did that opportunity just kind of come at you and you're like, okay, let's see where it goes?
Yeah, maybe you can coach me on this right now. We could do a live
Yeah.
coaching session to figure this out. So, coming out of coaching school, I picked relationship coaching, and I was like, all right, I'm going to get on social media, and where are my people? All right, my people are on this platform. I was like, they're on Pinterest, and they're on Instagram. And I had a website. I wasn't really doing much. Pinterest wasn't getting a lot of traction. And so I was like, I got to figure out this social media thing. Like, what is this? How do I get my name out there? The question, like, how do people know who Rachel is? Like, how are my people going to find me if I can't get out there? And that started my foray down the path of becoming a student of social media, and learning a lot about the back end and how it works, search engine optimization, qualitative analysis, the length of videos, how you hook people, the right content, like what people are searching, like the business behind what social media does and how you can make it impact. Excuse me. So I ended up being on all the channels. I was like, well, I'm going to own my brand everywhere. And each channel is a little bit differently in how they do it, but I can take one video and put it everywhere. And I did. And I've fortunately had a couple videos go extremely viral. So in the last 30 days, I think like 7 million views on a few videos, lots
Wow.
of followers. And would you not believe, now people are reaching out to me because they're like, we need social media. And they're like, tell us what we need to be doing. Like, do you charge for this? Do you figure this out? So in the beginning, I talked about amplifying your impact. That's my keynote speech. I'm now transitioning to also doing a keynote speech about amplifying your impact on social media.
Mhm.
And client, like crazily, Kristen, like the universe must be telling me something crazy. People are constantly reaching out. How much do you charge? What do you do? Can you help me with this? And so obviously there's an audience there. And weirdly, I like social media. I used to never be on it. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have anything. I didn't want anyone to know who I was. And now I'm on Pinterest TV, TikTok live, doing Facebook lives, LinkedIn lives. Like it's really morphed, but I would think obviously my energy behind it, and the fact that I do enjoy it must come out. And I'm happy to help. So yeah, so the social media, I'm right in the middle. I'm trying to figure it out. Now, based on what I've said, Kristen, what would you tell me from your coaching perspective?
I think a lot of times what I hear in there is like the limiting belief, right? Like from back before, it was like, I'm not on social media and I don't want to put myself out there. And that it just isn't for me. Right. And then yet it is for you. It's just that you had to find like your space in it and make it your own. And you're captivating. Like when you make your videos, like I'm sitting there and I'm just like, next one to the next one. It's like,
Please
what else does
share,
Rachel have to say?
share, copy, follow, all the things. Thank you.
But you do it so well. And there's obviously an interest because, it is like a whole separate animal, like learning all the algorithms and what works and what doesn't and how to hook people in and the length of the videos and then adding in all the transcripts. I mean, there's like all these fancy things. And my feelings about social media. I'm like, if I could not do it,
Perfect.
I would not want to do it. Like if you do start doing this for people, let me know because I'm signing up because it's just not my game.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
But yeah, I mean, I think that happens a lot, right? Like things come into our space that we maybe didn't look at them before and they just work. And I think it's being open to kind of like accepting those things. And also, there's the whole idea that I'm a big believer in. You can always change your mind, right? So like maybe 6 months from now, you're like, yeah, this was fun. And it was this little phase, but I'm kind of more interested in doing this. And you have the right to change your mind and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, that value for me of autonomy. Like I can
Mhm.
change my mind at any moment and do that. Yeah. It's always interesting what starts to show itself in different
Mhm.
ways. But I think, and I would say this for the audience that's listening, I mean for us too, as someone who is a multi-potentialite or a someone who like I struggle with, is this just a good idea or is this my squirrel moment that I'm getting sidetracked with? And knowing the difference between the two, saying like, is this just
Mhm.
this like actually something that's a nugget of something good, or is this actually distracting me from where I need to be focused? And I, to this day, continue to have to struggle with, I don't struggle. And I'm going to change the energy around the word struggle. To this day, I am in the process of figuring out how to navigate that so that I can
Mhm.
stay on track and stay focused and with my community. But yeah.
Another way to reframe that too is that maybe some of these things are finding you and they're leading you to the next potential opportunity. Like
Yeah.
this is just the bridge that's going to get you to something else that is going to be like, this is it. Like this is my passion. I feel like that with community, that's definitely something that's really big for me. I want to be able to create community. Um, and not just in the sense of like, here's my community of people that follow me on Instagram or that are on my newsletter. Like I actually want interactive online community around personal growth where people can go through that journey of transformation and growing into their next best self and doing it with people who are also growth mindset, who are there to support them. They can share experiences. Because I think that's so important to have like that support as you go through these life transitions. Like that's the only constant is change, right? So
And so
uh,
so powerful to put people together in a group that are doing the same thing, right? If you don't have the support outside, at least you have this group. So powerful what you do
mhm.
with service to their personal growth.
Yeah. And I think, when we came out of coach training, and this is, not to say anything bad about IPEC, but we were very focused on one-to-one coaching, right? Like that was all we were kind of taught is you go through the coach training program and then you set up your business and you do one-to-one coaching and you figure out, how many people can I coach in a day energetically that I'm not like depleted.
Yep.
And we never really kind of talked about these other options that might be available. And I think it was like maybe 2 or 3 months outside of starting my business, it was like, I want to be able to impact on a greater scale. And that's hard to do with one-to-one coaching. And it was just kind of like the wheels started turning. And before I knew it, like little breadcrumbs were leading me to all these different things. So there's like, retreats, there's group coaching, there's the online community, there's the podcast, there's the blogging. I mean, there's all these options that we can take our knowledge and our expertise from coaching and be able to help people like a one to many situation.
Yeah, the opportunities are endless. And we had talked about this in the pre-interview a week or so ago. And yeah, and I think very powerful to really learn the one-on-one, because that's where you really dive in and you're honing your skills. But there's a whole world of opportunities. And I think we were talking about too, I said coaching actually prepared me for social media, for having
Mm,
for the stuff that, when you're on and your videos are going viral and you're making content that can be a little bit, people have a lot of feelings about relationships and marriage and divorce, and there's some volatility there. People have a lot of feelings. They're going to say a lot of things. And I think more than anything, coaching prepared me for how to navigate through, and, how to energetically show up when people are not, showing up in a great way, and explore opportunities like Pinterest TV and
mhm,
other methodologies to get out of there. So really good schooling. Like, I get why they give you, like, get the core, but to your point
mhm.
too, there is so much, and how much fun we get
Yeah.
to explore and learn and ask questions,
Yeah.
and people that are doing it and figuring it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I love the fact too, it's like I've collaborated with several other coaches on other projects. And that to me is super fun to do as well, because you get different perspectives, right? Like everybody sees the world through their lens. And so it has really kind of like opened up the breadth of my offerings, because I'm able to bring just more insight than
Mhm.
what I would have brought alone.
Yeah.
And it's more fun to do it with somebody than it is by yourself. Like entrepreneurship is a pretty lonely game. So the more time that I can get collaborating with people and doing
Yeah.
projects together, I'm like all for that. So yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah. It's great that you're exploring it. I know I'm enjoying exploring it, and it's fun to talk to the others who are also exploring the different avenues and learning from everybody and bringing them in, and how can we do things together and create more impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you went through the transition again from like your old Rachel to this new Rachel, were there any biases or behavior patterns that you had to kind of look at and change in that process?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Because we all got them, right?
Excuse me. Yes, we all have them. For me, it was learning. Continue study staying present in the here and now, and not letting my old habits and patterns of living in the past or worrying about the future run my life. So staying present. Um, how I used to think about people and situations, my initial reactions, my initial bias to people acting a certain way, doing a certain thing, having to reframe that and learn that it's not good or bad. It just is. By labeling it, it only has meaning when I add a label to it. So I don't have to add a label to that thing. It just is what it is. So that for me has been, a learning experience. It's also changed what I would call like my junk food mentality. I would sit and watch, like maybe an episode of the Kardashians, or maybe it was the Real Housewives of something, and then as I've transitioned and changed, it's no longer interesting to me, because all it is putting energy and labels and on people that I don't know. I don't know their situation, and why do I want to put myself in a situation where I feel like I have to be inclined to label someone or judge someone? So that has really changed for me too. So, and I think go back to our friend conversations, where some of my friends, where a lot of the conversations were, did you see what so and so did, or did you watch that episode, or I can't believe she said that in that interview? And now I catch myself just like, yeah, I didn't see it. I have no idea. And it's not because of anything more than I just don't feel the need. That doesn't fill
Hmm.
my brain any longer. I want to be around people like you. I want to be around idea generators, people who are thinking about how are we in service to others? How are we changing the world? Like, what are we doing? And people who are really involved in that space is so inspiring to me. That gives me energy. So I think that has been a big shift too, is moving out of, and that's changed a lot of dynamics in my relationships. I'm just not there anymore. So
Hmm.
yes, so those are the biggest things. So not labeling, taking away some of those biases I used to have, staying in the present, and not getting rid of the junk food in
Yeah.
the brain,
Yep.
and filling it with great podcasts and books
Yeah.
and people and meditation and inspiration and the stuff that actually feeds me instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
How
I
about you?
definitely think, I feel the same, like when you're talking about like keeping up with the Kardashians, like I think back to like, it was probably the end of my marriage. Maybe this was partly why my marriage ended. I mean, I was like addicted to the reality shows, right? Like keeping up with the Kardashians, The Hills was another one. It was just like every single week I was tuned in. And then when they do marathons, and I'd seen every episode, but it was like, oh, but there's a marathon and I'm gonna like veg out with this all day. And there just came this point in time where it was like, why do I care so much about what these people are doing in their lives? Like, when I could be doing something with mine instead of just sitting here watching them. Like I don't know, this light bulb kind of came on. And I think, another big pattern that I noticed was I definitely felt that in uncomfortable situations, and I guess you could even almost say like conflict or confrontation, I steered clear of it completely. And that was something that I had to look at, and I had to change that pattern. And I had to look at the way that I looked at conflict and confrontation, that it's not a bad thing, right? There's that good, bad judgment.
Yeah.
And it's a skill. It's a communication skill. And here we go with relationships. And you have to learn how to handle conflict and confrontation in every relationship. And it's going to be different depending on the relationship. And so I definitely had to get out of the pattern of like dissociating or separating myself when there was a conflict, and hoping that it just smoothed over. And then I'll go back and like, how are we doing now? And actually looking at that as like, this is coming up for a reason. And this is an opportunity to enhance our relationship and strengthen our relationship, not break it apart. And when I came from that perspective, like handling conflict and confrontation got a lot easier. Coaching skills definitely helped as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was probably a really big one for me.
Conflict's a big one. It's a big one. And everyone talks about in the relationship, we talk about our love languages. And I talk to people, let's talk about our conflict languages. And people's ears always go up. They're like, what? Yeah, well, we have a conflict language. We have our go-to patterns when it comes to conflict. And those patterns can be very destructive. And it makes us not actually get to a place of being able to talk and solve the real issues that we're talking about. We end up just nitpicking up here and there. But yeah, to your point, I tell people there's conflict languages as well. It's not just love languages. And I think it's almost more important to know your patterns there, because that's with everybody, not just your partner, but people you work with, your neighbor across the street who's put something on the lawn you don't like. It's the person in front of you at the grocery store who's writing a check and you're like, can we move this along? That's it's everybody. Right?
It is. And it's so interesting to, like, you brought the 5 love languages. And I know I'm actually 100% sure that you've talked about the Gottman's research in some of your posts. And that, I mean, to me is absolutely fascinating that they can watch a conversation between a married couple. It's like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and tell whether or not they're going to be married in 8 years, and like 95% accuracy. And that's all based around conflict communication.
Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling are the 4 horsemen of conflict and how we show up, like I said. And it's incredible. And it's not just, I tell people, it's not just calling it out in your partner, like, hey, you're being defensive, or stop criticizing me. It's really nice. Like, all right, when do I start to feel like, oh, I'm getting defensive, or that just came out of my mouth and that was very critical of them, and starting to pull that back. Let's slow that train down. That's a very interesting one. And I think another piece of information that's very interesting, not that we've talked about relationships at all, but I would love for people, if they've stuck around, which they have, all arguments really fall into 3 different argument types. That's it, all arguments that we're arguing about. And that's another big thing to think about as well. It's about power and control is the first one. Whose priorities are mattering most? Who's got the power? Care and closeness is the second argument. The I love yous, the planning, the date nights. And the third one is respect and recognition. It's about being seen. So you might be arguing about clothes on the floor again. You don't look up at me from your iPad when I'm talking to you, or why do I always have to run things by you? That's what the argument seems like, but it's actually one of the 3. And when you can get to that, the nuts and bolts of that, that's where the real progress is made. That's when we're starting to cook with some grease. So along with Gottman, those are very important.
I'm just wondering too, like, your husband must love when you guys get into conversations and you're like, You are doing this.
I try to recognize it in myself first, and he's amazing, and he has evolved, and not from me being like, you need to do it this way, and like all of us, when we show up, it's by example, right? So
Yeah.
when there's a situation or something's going on in the house, a lot of going on, I maybe in the past have gone defensive. Now I'm just going to sit, listen, acknowledge, take accountability where I need to take accountability, and we're going to move on. Or recognizing if he's saying this thing up here, this is probably what he's asking for down here, and how can I do that? And he does that now too. It's not from any prompting, just how we've learned to evolve and communicate in. And now it is funny though, because he'll start seeing it in other people. Like he starts to recognize like, oh, and it's helpful, right? We're all humans. We're all trying to figure this thing out, and
Yeah.
how we can show up the best in who we are, not trying to make anyone be anything that they're not, or point it out in them that they're not. As you
Yeah.
know, people will only change when they're ready to change. They're not.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's interesting, like what you bring up, because a lot of times the things that we pick out in other people, it's like they're just holding the mirror for us. Like that's
Oh,
actually something going on inside of us. And that was definitely something I learned in coach training, was when I'm triggered by something or something that somebody does, it was like, all right, let me flip that around and look at like what is going on with me in that situation. And I would say like with a pretty good accuracy, it's something going on inside of me. And
yeah.
I just happen to notice it in them.
It's so true. I've found it too, when people are criticizing others, or you hear people gossiping about others, or they're just maybe idle conversation, they're really telling on themselves. Like they're really just telling what's going on with them, or a part of them they don't want other people to see. And it's very fascinating, but the triggers that you bring up are extremely important to recognize, and what's
Mhm.
going on with me and
Yeah.
how. Yeah.
So when you were kind of going through this whole transition, I mean, obviously fear comes up. It's a natural thing as we're moving into spaces that are new to us. How did you manage the fear that you had?
I manage fear through staying present. So when I start to get fearful about something, I need to bring myself back to, in this very moment, what control do I have? And that's myself, and that's me, what I say, what I do, how I act. And for me, in order to pull back fear, what's the next best decision I can make? And that's not big decision. The next best decision I can make is I need to drink 8 ounces of water right now, or I need to take a 5-minute break, not something that's in the future. So for me, for fear, because fear gives us the false sense that we can predict the future, and it's trying to make us think that we know what's going to happen, and I don't want to go through that twice. So when it starts to peek in, I'm like, we'll just get present, control what we control, how we're going to show up, how we're going to be, and just do it. And now I think about, I'm just being bold. When that feels, I just switch fear to, I'm just being bold, I'm just going to do something different, and we're just going to see what happens, because I don't want to spend one more minute on this planet worrying about what anyone else is going to think
Absolutely.
or
And you
do.
don't know how things are going to turn out. And, you could have the best predictions and all the data, and it can come out completely and totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does us no good, but it is a very well-worn neural pathway that we have, that
Mhm.
fear, that self-doubt, that worry. And it's not like it's necessarily all bad. It's there to protect us, right? It's there to give us that sense of, pause. It's when it starts to control your life. And I love the saying where it's like your brain is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. And when we let our brain, our fear master our thoughts and control, which it does for a lot of people, that's no fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder too, I'm curious because I do think that like raising our consciousness, being present, being in the moment versus being in our past, our future, other places, I think that's a really important skill. But I know it, I guess that's the thing. It's a skill that you have to practice. So what practices have you found that have helped you to develop staying present in the moment?
Catching myself. So when it's catching myself, I'm maybe doing the dishes, and a person or an instance or something that is starting to come into my brain. I acknowledge it. I don't, but they're like passing clouds. Those thoughts, your thoughts are like passing clouds, and you actually get to choose what you want to pull down and what you want to wrestle with or do. So I acknowledge that it's there, and I know it sounds strange, or there's a person in my life that maybe there's been some previous conflict and they come into my mind and I'm thinking, I actually, and I close my eyes, I give them a virtual hug and I let them go
Mhm.
because I can't do anything about it. And I get back to what I'm doing. And it is, to your point, it's a skill and it's a practice and it's constant. It's constant, but it gets easier. It gets easier to just be here with you right now in this moment, and then I will do the next moment when the next moment happens. I'm curious,
Mhm.
do you practice this? What do you do for
I mean, so that sounds a lot like mindfulness, right? Which
yeah.
I do. This has always been like a struggle point for me, right? It's like we go into autopilot so easily. Like you just don't even know it. And the next thing you know, it's like I've driven from here to here and I don't remember anything about the drive. And I was
Yes.
thinking about like probably 20 things in that 2 minute time interval. And for me, it's like I have to almost do it with transitions. Like when I stop one task and start another, it's like stopping right there and getting really present,
Yeah.
and creating those, I guess, like little external reminders. Um, Meditation has helped tremendously,
Yes.
especially with the thought part where it's like, when I first started meditating, I was like, I suck at this because my mind just, it never goes blank. It's never clear and like quiet up in there. It's just like monkey mind all over the place. But that's the point, right? It's being able to stop and look at your thoughts and then not attach to them and not say like this, I identify with this thought. We're having all kinds of weird, crazy thoughts all day long. And it's taking the time, I think, in that practice than in your everyday life. It shouldn't be any different than meditating, right? So you're noticing the thought come in, you're not attaching to it, you're letting it go. And that's kind of the process there, right? I think it really is just finding different ways to kind of almost like remind yourself to come back into that presence. Um, and I even noticed that with like conversations too, that it's like sometimes I'll catch myself having conversations with people and my mind is somewhere else. And it's like, as soon as I notice that, then it's like, okay, come back into here. Now I use the senses a lot too of like, okay, what's one thing I can see? What's one thing I can hear? What's one thing I can smell? What's one thing I can touch? And that brings you into like that physical moment.
That's great. I love that. I love that. And you talked about too, how do you those external reminders? I have like sticky notes everywhere. So if it's a good thought, if it's a good thought, but like I can't give you, 20 minutes right now, I'm going to write you
Yeah.
down and I will come back to you and I will give you the time. And that for me, my brain is enough. But meditation is massive. I do quantum meditation. I love quantum meditation. And it is just, it's done wonders for my ability to not just think, but to feel, to do, to just be present.
Yeah. It's I mean, I think I like all types of meditation, but there's been one that has really changed the way that I look at consciousness. So Sam Harris, he's
Oh,
an author, but he started an app. I want to say it was back in 2020, when the pandemic hit, and it's called I'm drawing a complete blank right now. Trying to promote this. Waking Up is
oh,
the
waking up.
app,
Oh, waking up. Okay.
and he talks. So he has a very different type of approach to it, where we feel like consciousness is in our head, right? And he takes this approach of like, it's not in your head. Like you almost want a headless approach. Consciousness is just all around you, right? And it's happening at every moment. And he pulls in a lot of the, paying attention to the breath, paying attention to sounds that you hear, almost losing the sense of like a body. It's just like feeling the energy of your whole entire body, but not necessarily like identifying hands, feet, legs, anything like that. Um, and that has he's very like heady. Like the first book I read of his was Free Will, and it was like I feel like I need to go back and read it again because it was like what, just very next level up there.
Yeah.
But it's a different approach that has gotten me to look at meditation from a different perspective as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important, not to just stick with the same like Vipassana all the time. Change it up and try different things, and you're gonna learn different tactics from different skills.
Yeah. It just start. Like, and because that is also a practice, right? And everyone, like you said, the monkeys are always, at the circus,
Yeah.
everything's happening. And but how do you find the right one that works? Because there's so many different types, and some people want silence and just music. Some people need someone to have a guided meditation to help focus their thoughts and energy so that their brain isn't, focusing, and the options are out there. I'll be interested to look up Sam Harris and his work for
Yeah.
sure.
Let me know what you think. Like I said, it's different. I've
I don't
introduced
know,
him
because
to
the
several
quantum
people.
meditation, the quantum stuff I've been doing is very different too. It's a very different way to think about how we are here, but similar in the sense of our energy and the space, and we can create any reality we want. Like there's a lot that we don't know because our senses are so limited by what we can actually experience, but we know other experiences are possible because bats can see in the dark, and I would not go up against a cat doing an obstacle course in the middle of the night because they're going to win. Right. And like, and your dog can smell whatever. Like, so we know it's possible. We just don't experience it. And so it's very interesting to think about, what do I not know?
I mean, I don't even know what I don't know yet at this point. So you're going to have to try Sam Harris's, and I'm going to have to try quantum.
I'll send you Dr. Joe Dispenza. It's a little different too. You know Dr. Joe? Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So funny, like the little weird synchronicities, because I did a podcast recording yesterday and he came up in that as well. And it's like, why does he keep coming up?
Why does he keep coming up? I wonder. Maybe you're ready. Maybe you're ready for it. You're ready for something new. Maybe I'm ready for some new Sam Harris. Maybe I'm ready to switch a little bit. This is good.
I always feel like whenever the breadcrumbs get dropped, I just need to start picking them up. So that's a rule. So, well, Rachel, it has been so great talking to you today. And thank you so much for coming on and so vulnerably sharing your story and your experiences and all the knowledge and wisdom that you have. And I typically end each episode by asking my guests 3 random questions, just so our listeners can kind of get to know you on a personal level a little bit more.
Great.
So my first one would be, what is your favorite word?
My favorite word, I would say my favorite word is bold.
It's a good word. Solid. 4 letters, 4-letter words, the best.
It's the word I'm living right now, so it's a good word for me.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, so this one's not really a question. It's more of like a finish the sentence.
Okay.
If I could turn back time, I would.
Not.
Ooh, I like it. No regrets. Not a single one.
I love regret because it's taught me a lot, but I think I'm so amped about the runway forward.
Yeah.
That to me is endless in opportunity.
Future focus.
Yes.
And the third one would be, what is one thing that you are legitimately bad at?
And maybe you can explain it to me. Maybe you can help. I legitimately do not understand or bad at understanding offsides. Does that count?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It must be like in the male DNA thing, because I've never actually known a girl. So like they can call what the offsides or the whatever, like 1 nanosecond after the play has started. Like sometimes the flag hasn't even flown, right? And I'm like, what? Oh, it was this, it was that. What? Yeah, how did you notice that? I mean, it's like this like micro movement. So yeah, I think that's a guy thing.
It must be a guy thing. But if I was to say the other thing that makes, I'm legitimately bad at closing cabinet doors. And I didn't even know this was a thing of mine. I didn't even know it. And after I'm not 2 or 3 months into coaching school, I'm like, why are these cabinet doors open all the time? And my husband just stared at me. He's like, because you don't close them. I'm like, I always close cabinet doors. I'm legitimately bad. My brain does not have the full hand to door energy combination to get it to close. So understanding offsides and not I don't have the gene for it, I guess.
Yeah. I think, like I said, I think it's a dude thing. If I ever find the girl that can do that, then I mean, yeah, I'll let you know for sure. And we're going to interview her and find out. It needs
to be on the podcast. I need visuals. This needs to be video and we need to sit and talk.
I was thinking though, because I remember back to Mod 1, one of the things a challenge that you took on was because you were not good at golf and you went out to the driving range. And I wonder Would you still consider yourself to be bad at golf?
No, I'm not. I'm actually decent at golf and I love playing golf. It turned into not only me taking up golf, my husband started taking up golf as well. We would go on date days and go out and play golf. And now my son has started. He has started his golfing. So we are like a golfing family now.
Family. Look at that. Look how that just fell into your lap too. Who
The
knew?
world worked. It really did. And it's been so much fun just to go do something. I'm not gonna lie, I still get a little intimidated on the first hole when everyone's sort of watching and waiting to see how you do, but I'm good. I like it.
Performance anxiety. We can work on that too. We can coach around that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, if our listeners want to get more information about you or what you're doing or interested in your coaching, where would they find you out in the world?
Yes. So my website is realizeyoucoaching.com. You can just Google my name, Rachel Kuhlen. You will see everything come up. I am on almost all social media platforms. So Instagram, TikTok, Rachel Success Coach. So you can find me. I'm out there. I'm not hard to find. Believe me, you'll find me. I was amplifying my impact in social media. So please join me. I do offer coaching. I do private coaching, and then I do offer one-on-one single sessions. I know some coaches do, some coaches don't. So happy to offer a podcast discount to your listeners. So if we want to do, 15% off one-on-one coaching for single sessions, and we can name it the Kristen 15, happy to offer it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your generosity with that.
Absolutely. This has been so much fun.
It has been fun. And I'm sure at some point we will do another episode about something else, because I feel like there's a whole laundry list of things that we could talk about. So
Forever.
thank you again for taking the time to be with us today. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you, Kristen. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.